Few television shows have left a mark on the American heart quite like Little House on the Prairie. For nearly a decade, from 1974 to 1983, it wasn't just a program you watched on NBC on Wednesday nights. It was a weekly ritual, a shared experience, a window into a simpler time, even if that simplicity was often an illusion. At its core, Little House told the story of the Ingalls family, pioneers carving out a life on the Minnesota frontier. But what truly made the series endure wasn't just Laura's adventures or Pa's fiddle songs. It was the extraordinary ensemble of actors who didn't just play their roles. They lived them, loved them, and in some cases, were forever changed by them. This is the story of that all-star cast, not just who they portrayed on screen, but who they were behind the scenes. The challenges they faced, the legacies they built, and the complicated truths that time has revealed. Let's begin, as the show always did, with Charles Ingalls, the steady hand, the moral anchor, the man in the suspenders with a kind word and a ready smile. Played by Michael Landon, Charles wasn't just a character, he was an ideal. A father who listened, a husband who respected his wife as an equal, a neighbor who stood up for justice even when it cost him. Landon didn't just embody that ideal, he engineered it. Long before Little House, Landon was already a television legend. At just 20 years old, he landed the role of Little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza, one of TV's first true mega hits. For 14 seasons, he charmed audiences with his boyish grin and emotional vulnerability. But by the early 1970s, Landon was ready for more. He wanted creative control. He wanted to tell stories that mattered. And when he read Laura Ingalls Wilder's autobiographical novels, he saw not just a period drama, but a canvas for exploring human decency. He pitched Little House on the Prairie to NBC not just as an actor, but as a producer and director. And the network, trusting his track record, gave him unprecedented authority. Over the show's 9-season run, Landon directed 87 episodes, wrote 13, and shaped nearly every major storyline. He insisted on emotional authenticity, even when it meant tackling difficult subjects like racism, addiction, and death. In fact, the infamous 2-part episode, The Craftsman, where a black family is run out of town, was Landon's direct response to real-life prejudice he witnessed during location scouting. But Landon's perfectionism came at a cost. Cast and crew often described him as demanding, sometimes harsh. He expected long hours, emotional precision, and absolute commitment. Yet, those who worked closely with him also spoke of his generosity. He quietly paid for crew members' medical bills, gave struggling actors second chances, and fought for fair pay for child stars. Off-screen, Landon's personal life was complex. He was married 3 times and had 9 children. His third wife, Cindy, would later say that Michael lived the values he portrayed, but also struggled with the weight of being seen as a saint. When he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 1990, he chose to go public, appearing on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson to raise awareness. He died just months later, at age 54. His final words, according to his family, were, "I'm ready to go home." For millions, that home will always be Walnut Grove. Now, let's turn to the woman who stood beside him, Caroline Ingalls, lovingly known as Ma. Played with quiet strength by Karen Grassle, Caroline was the emotional backbone of the Ingalls household. While Charles often delivered the big speeches, it was Caroline who held the family together through silent strength, mending clothes, soothing fevers, and offering wisdom in a whisper. Grassle brought a grounded realism to the role. A classically trained stage actress with a degree in drama from UC Berkeley, she initially hesitated to take the part, fearing it would typecast her as a TV mom. But she was drawn to Caroline's dignity and resilience. Over time, however, Grassle grew frustrated with how the character was written, often sidelined in favor of Charles's moral monologues or Laura's antics. In her memoir, Bright Lights, Prairie Dust, she wrote, "Caroline was more than a backdrop. She was a pioneer woman with opinions, fears, and dreams of her own." That tension came to a head in season 6, when Grassle clashed with producers over a storyline that had Caroline passively accept Charles's decision to move the family, again, without consultation. She pushed back, demanding more agency for her character. Though she didn't always win those battles, her advocacy helped pave the way for more nuanced portrayals of mothers on television. After Little House, Grassle returned to theater and became an outspoken environmentalist and feminist. She's rarely done interviews about the show, not out of bitterness, but because she wants to be known for more than one role. Yet, whenever she does speak of it, she does so with warmth, especially when recalling the bond she formed with the child actors, whom she treated like her own. And speaking of child actors, no discussion of Little House is complete without Melissa Gilbert as Laura Ingalls. Cast at just 9 years old, Gilbert didn't just play Laura, she became her in the eyes of a nation. With her freckles, braids, and spirited defiance, Laura was the audience's entry point into the world of the Prairie. She was curious, impulsive, and unafraid to speak her mind, qualities that often got her into trouble but also made her relatable. What many viewers didn't know was that Gilbert's real life was far more turbulent than Laura's. Adopted as an infant, she struggled with identity and belonging long before those themes became mainstream. On set, she was often exhausted, working up to 12-hour days while trying to keep up with schoolwork. She later revealed in her memoir, Prairie, that she developed an eating disorder as a teenager, partly due to the pressure of maintaining a TV-perfect image. Yet, Gilbert also credits the show with giving her purpose. She formed a deep, sibling-like bond with Melissa Sue Anderson, Mary, and looked up to Michael Landon as a father figure. So much so that when he died, she said it felt like losing a parent all over again. Decades later, she'd returned to the Little House universe, producing and starring in TV movies based on Wilder's later books. But perhaps the most fascinating evolution is how Gilbert has reevaluated the show's legacy. In recent years, she's spoken openly about the series' romanticized view of westward expansion and its erasure of Native American perspectives. "We told a white settler's story," she admitted in a 2020 interview. And while it came from a place of love, it wasn't the whole truth. That brings us to Melissa Sue Anderson, who played Mary Ingalls, the eldest daughter, the good girl, the one who always did her chores without complaint. Anderson's portrayal of Mary's descent into blindness and her determination to live a full life was groundbreaking for 1970s television. The episodes dealing with Mary's diagnosis were handled with rare sensitivity, showing her grief, frustration, and eventual acceptance. Anderson earned an Emmy nomination for her performance in 1978, the only Little House cast member ever nominated. But behind the scenes, she was growing disillusioned. She felt Mary had become too perfect, too saintly, a cardboard cutout of virtue. She wanted Mary to have flaws, desires, even anger. When the writers refused to give her that complexity, she began to pull back. By season 5, she negotiated a reduced role, appearing in only a handful of episodes per season. She left entirely before the final season, pursuing film roles and eventually moving to Canada with her family. Unlike many child stars, Anderson walked away from Hollywood entirely, choosing privacy over fame. In rare interviews, she's expressed gratitude for the opportunity, but also relief at escaping the spotlight. Now, let's talk about the character everyone loved to hate, Nellie Oleson. With her ringlets, smug smile, and cutting remarks, Nellie was the ultimate foil to Laura's earnestness, and Alison Arngrim played her with delicious relish. But the real story behind Nellie is one of survival and redemption. Arngrim, like Gilbert, was a child actor navigating a chaotic home life. Years later, she revealed she had been sexually abused by a family friend from age 6 to 12. She said playing Nellie, a character who wielded power through meanness, was oddly therapeutic. Nellie couldn't be victimized, she explained. She was in control. That felt safe. After the show ended, Arngrim struggled with typecasting. No one wanted to hire Nellie for serious roles. But in the 1990s, she reinvented herself, not as an actress but as an activist. She became a fierce advocate for child protection laws and HIV/AIDS awareness. She worked as a caregiver during the epidemic's peak. Today, she's a best-selling author and public speaker, using her fame to fight for the vulnerable. In her words, "If I can help one kid feel less alone, then Nellie was worth it." Then there was Victor French, who brought gruff charm to Isaiah Edwards, Charles's best friend, the town drunk turned loyal ally. French and Landon had a decades-long friendship that began on Bonanza, where French played various guest roles. Their chemistry was so natural that Landon insisted. French joined Little House as a series regular, so French's portrayal of Isaiah's redemption arc, from a broken man drowning in grief to a devoted husband and father, was one of the show's most powerful transformations. Off-screen, French was known for his booming laugh and old-school Hollywood demeanor. Tragically, he died of lung cancer in 1989 at age 54, just 2 years after the show ended and 2 years before Landon. Many believe their bond was so strong that losing one made the other's passing feel even more devastating to fans. As the series progressed, new faces joined the Ingalls family. In Season 4, Matthew Labyorteaux was introduced as Albert Quinn Ingalls, an orphan taken in by Charles and Caroline. Albert's storylines tackled some of the show's most controversial topics, including his battle with leukemia in the TV movie Little House, Blessing in Disguise. That storyline led to a surge in bone marrow donor registrations across the U.S., proving the show's power to drive real-world change. And in the final season, a young Shannen Doherty appeared as Jenny Wilder, the niece of Almanzo Wilder, played by Dean Butler. Though her role was small, it marked the beginning of a major Hollywood career. Doherty would go on to star in Beverly Hills, 90210, and Charmed. But she's always spoken fondly of her time on Little House, calling it the best acting school I ever had. Of course, no cast is complete without the supporting players who made Walnut Grove feel alive. Charlotte Stewart as the warm-hearted schoolteacher, Miss Beadle, Richard Bull as the gentle storekeeper, Nels Olson, Catherine McGregor as the sharp-tongued Harriet Olson, Nellie's equally formidable mother, whose comedic timing masked a deep loneliness. McGregor, a trained Shakespearean actress, once said she played Harriet as a woman terrified of becoming irrelevant in a changing world. That depth is why, even in her most over-the-top moments, Harriet never felt like a caricature. Now, let's step back and consider the show's legacy, not just as entertainment, but as a cultural artifact. Little House on the Prairie aired during a turbulent time in America, post-Vietnam, post-Watergate, during an energy crisis and economic uncertainty. Audiences craved comfort, simplicity, and moral clarity. The show delivered that, but not without cost. In recent years, scholars and fans have re-examined Little House through a more critical lens. The series largely ignored the displacement of Native Americans, a glaring omission given that the Ingalls family settled on land that was not legally theirs. In fact, Laura Ingalls Wilder's original books contain language and attitudes that are now widely recognized as racist. The TV show softened those elements, but never fully confronted them. Michael Landon himself admitted in later interviews that the show presented an idealized version of history. "We weren't making a documentary," he said. "We were making a prayer." And perhaps that's the key to understanding Little House. It was less about historical accuracy and more about emotional truth, the universal desire for family, safety, and belonging. Today, the cast members, those still with us, continue to honor that spirit. Melissa Gilbert serves on the board of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. Alison Arngrim tours the country speaking about trauma and resilience. Karen Grassle teaches acting workshops focused on authenticity. And every few years, they reunite, sometimes for charity, sometimes just to remember. Because for all its flaws and simplifications, Little House on the Prairie gave us something rare, a television family that felt real. Not perfect, but trying. Not always right, but always loving. And in a world that often feels fractured, that's a story worth remembering. So the next time you hear the gentle strum of that fiddle, Or see Pa walking across the golden prairie at sunset. Remember the real people behind the roles, their struggles, their triumphs, and the enduring gift they gave us all. They didn't just play a family on TV, they helped us believe in one,